At Mike's Hard Lemonade, we believe the world needs more Mikes. That's why we work hard to ensure every bottle is bursting with the flavor of hand-picked lemons for more refreshing moments with refreshing friends. Please drink responsibly. Mike's Hard Lemonade Company, Chicago, Illinois.
To get the Crime Writers on After Show right now, go to patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, how did a man get away with kidnapping his neighbor's daughter not once, but twice, by exploiting everyone in the family? We'll return to our discussion of the WTF-infused documentary, Abducted in Plain Sight. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of the These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hey, Kevin.
You remembered how to say that.
Yes, I did. So, Kevin, this is obviously Thursday's podcast, our rewind. What is happening on Monday's brand new show?
On Monday, we're going to be talking about the new podcast from Leon Neyfakh. It's the Audible original Fiasco Vigilante.
All right, that was a great discussion. I'm looking forward to our audience hearing that one. But what are we going to be hearing in today's Crime Writers on Classic?
All right, we're going back to our January 28th, 2019 review of Abducted in Plain Sight.
Can't wait to hear that one. That was wild.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned this at the end of our review, and we got a very long discussion on this one. So you're getting plenty of audio for your dollar.
Bang for your buck.
Bang for your buck on
with
this one.
Free podcast.
Yeah, where I met the director at the Toronto True Crime Film Festival.
Sky.
And it was Sky Borgman, and it was opening night. And I arrived a night late, and it had been the big buzz. This was the premiere film, and I was like, when am I going to see it again? And she said Netflix, and I had no idea. I was trying to imagine an entire theater reacting to this show.
Yeah.
The one that freaked us out while we were sitting on our couch. So.
It was wild.
All right, why don't we get to it?
All right, can't wait to hear it. Netflix has outdone itself with its latest true crime documentary, Abducted in Plain Sight. The doc recalls the story of Jan Broberg, who at the age of 12 was kidnapped by her next-door neighbor, then kidnapped by him again 4 years later.
Berchtold said, I want to take Jan out horseback riding. When she didn't come home, I was a little nervous.
It was a nationwide search.
Jan went with me voluntarily. They bring in aliens and mind washing.
The mission was that I was to have a child that would save the alien planet by the time I turned 16.
The Brobergs say the attacks still continue.
If you're laying a trap for me, I'll kill you.
His number one goal was to seduce Jan Broberg. And if he had to destroy the family, he would do it.
The documentary explores the nearly unbelievable story of how Robert, known as B. Berchtold, manipulated the entire Broberg family in order to be with a young girl. Relying on the strength of its source material, Abducted in Plain Sight is told in a straightforward interview format that is both shocking and maddening. Before we get into the conversation, I want to say two quick things. One is that we are going to be talking about plot points for Abducted in Plain Sight. So if you want to remain spoiler-free and just hear our review, jump ahead to the show notes. Number two, this documentary covers sensitive stuff. I want to give a bit of a trigger warning about the kinds of stuff that we're going to be talking about in the documentary, but also the way that I am sure we're going to be talking about it, because it gets kind of absurd, and I'm just going to leave it there. So if you're the kind of person who does not want to hear people perhaps saying WTF and laughing a lot when they're talking about a very sensitive story, this may not be the review for you, so you may just want to skip ahead to the up and down reviews. All right. So the one thing I want to talk about is the format of Abducted in Plain Sight. Those very stylized recreations cut in between just the straight interviews. Toby, what did you think of the format of this documentary and the justice it may or may not have done to the telling of this story?
I actually had a big problem with it. I thought it was completely sort of deceitful. And at first I was like, oh man, they've got film of this, because it's always kind of fuzzy and you don't get close-ups or whatever. And they never tell you that these are recreations. At least if they did, I didn't see it. So I guess I get the point of wanting to have something and then have it seem like it's sort of period appropriate, but maybe just putting a note that, these are recreations or something. It just seemed deceptive to me.
Kevin has a look on his face. Kevin, what are you thinking right now?
You described it as highly stylized. I think, the Jinx is highly stylized. I mean, I think it's intentionally lo-fi because they do want to match they did have some home movie footage. It's funny, it did make me think about, okay, look, there's just no way you can do any of these documentaries without some sort of B-roll. And unless you have, enough photographs to keep it interesting.
To keep Ken Burnsing over?
Yeah, everybody does it a different way. Some there's animation, some there is, recreation. I thought that, that it fit what they're trying to do. In the first 2 or 3 reenactment scenes that I think, oh yeah, they have something, but I think we're fairly sophisticated in understanding that this is how they're doing that. So I don't know. I don't recall any documentary putting up the reenactment.
Well, usually
thing.
It's more obvious, I think. But I have to say, yeah. I have one question though, and Laura, maybe you can answer this and then jump in with what you wanted to say about these reenactments. But there were a lot of reenactments in these little scenes about the girl lying on a bed, the girl listening to the aliens on the box, which we'll talk about. Who the hell would sign their kid up for this acting part? Would you be enthused as a parent to be like, oh, my daughter got a part in this Netflix production in which she plays the repeated victim of a child molester and kidnapper? It's crazy to think about that way.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about that. It's okay, that's especially when the guy has to do his therapy and lay on bed next to her.
Right.
No. Absolutely not.
Wait, I just got to say, it was super chaste as far as a film reenactment and the set, Yeah. I think at one time you see him go touch her shoulder, and I think it's the only physical contact they make. The child actors aren't necessarily told the larger scope of what this character is happening.
Yes, but still, their image appears
creepy.
In this. I always think about this. Whenever we see anything a story of crime that involves kids, I think about it when we watch Law and Order, and it's like, oh, my kid got a part where they're playing a dead kid. I always just think about I know it's a job. I get that it's a job. I get it.
I don't think you do, though.
It's weird, though, to me. It is weird to me.
The Exorcist.
It's weird to me. It's weird. All right, Laura, go ahead. Sorry.
So I actually didn't mind the reenactments like Toby did, because in so many of these shows, the reenactments are so freaking cheesy and so bad and it's just so fake looking. When you have the really bad actors recreating a scene while somebody's, and you're like, oh, this is horrendous. So this, I kind of, it actually looked real. It, I think, just kind of helped the story move along. So once I did have a minute in the beginning where I was like, God, how did they get this footage? And I'm like, no, this isn't real footage. And once I recognized that, it actually did work for me.
I think time and place is very important to the story and our understanding, to the amount of understanding anybody can have about this story, about why things went down as they did. So it was sort of a reminder of this is the 70s, I think it kind of fit. But
all right.
Toby's got a different opinion, and that's cool.
That's cool. We all are going to agree to disagree on that. Well, one thing that I would like to do talking about this, now that we've talked about really the only style thing I think we can talk about in this documentary, because that's all that it is interviews and those reenactments, I want to just go through some of the points of the actual story that they're telling and get your reaction to them. Because that's what the documentary asks us to do. So that's what I'm going to ask you to do, okay? So let's start at the beginning. B, the friend of the family of the Brobergs, we hear about his relationship with the parents and his wife's relationship with the mom and his relationship with them and their kids play together, live across the street, yada, yada, yada. And then we hear that as part of his alleged psychotherapy, one of the things that B does with the parents' permission, with Jan's parents' permission, is come over to their house at night and lie down with her and sleep with her in her bed as part of his own therapy to get over his own childhood trauma or whatever bullshit that is.
Berchtold was laying by me, and he definitely had his hands on me. He said I was tossing and turning a lot, and that I must have just, gotten uncomfortable and taken my panties down. It felt like it was plausible, because what was not plausible was that this person could have done anything to harm me.
And then that culminates in him taking her to visit some horses one day and kidnapping her and taking her to Mexico. All right, so that is the setup of this documentary. Laura, What do you think so far?
What the fuck? As I was watching this, I was just, in the beginning, I'm like, well, that doesn't, like I just kept, my mouth just kept dropping. Like, I can't believe these people, their suspicion isn't up. And I'm like, they're pretty naive. And then once we got to Mexico, I was just like, what the? I was watching this by myself, and I actually started like screaming at the TV when they were in the Mexican prison.
At one point, one of the Mexican police officers led me down into a lower level in this dank, dark, water-smelling hallway to B's cell. He gave the guard his gold ring in order for the guard to let him talk to me.
What the ever? I don't even know. I can't even. It's just, it's like, it didn't even seem real. Like, one thing after another kept happening. And I'm like, you've got to fucking be kidding me. Now they're in a Mexican prison. Now the aliens are coming. Now they want to get married. Oh, wait, no, they are married. Like, it just kept. And then, the parents are not doing anything about the fact that they're married. Like, what is wrong with these people?
Now, Toby, you said that you feel like there's two things going on here. The sort of tragic, disturbing story about a pedophile, and then weird stuff about aliens. But as you say, that's just a detail. But you do have an interesting point in your notes about the manipulation of the parents. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think that Berchtold, like, he was able to kind of assess that family, and I think there's a bunch of things that you can kind of, like, some of the stuff like kind of just comes out in the documentary, other things you can kind of intuit, but he's able to kind of size them up and figure out what their weaknesses are, particularly sexually, with the parents, and sort of unerringly figures out how to manipulate them. And the parents are just slaves to their passion or something. I mean, I don't even know how to really go about trying to explain how, like, the incident where Berchtold's in the car and says, basically, I've got a hard on, Mr. What's-his-face, can you give me a hand? And the guy's like, oh, okay,
I could see that he was sexually aroused. He says, oh, can you give me some relief? We were laughing, and he said, oh, Bob, it's just kid stuff, and I've got to have relief.
He was earnest.
You're obviously in a tough situation. Anything I can do to help out. And it's just like the idea that that Berchtold has figured that psychology out enough that this guy isn't going to be like, screw you, dude, and stay the hell away from my family, which is, I think, what, like, a lot of people might say. The guy's like, oh, yeah, okay. And then he's able to use it to blackmail him. So, I mean, in some ways, I think the most interesting part of this whole documentary is just how sort of incisive Berchtold was about the family and what he could get away with, and kind of the steps that he takes to make sure that he has access to Jan.
He was very good at it. That's all I kept saying over and over again. And this is where the trigger warning stuff comes in. I kept turning to Kevin and I'm like, as pedophiles go, like, this guy is super fucking good at being a pedophile. He's really good at it. Like, he has this whole thing down, like, nailed. Because, I mean, there's a lot of people. His wife, who we hear almost nothing about, was totally cool with it.
Well, we don't know if she's totally cool with it.
Well, she's the one who convinced them to drop the charges and sign the affidavit so he can come back into the country.
You don't think that he had her manipulated?
He totally did.
Yeah.
What that's right. I say there's a lot of people that he's playing a game with. All these people at once. He had all these balls in the air. He's got the Jan stuff. He's got the mom stuff. He's got the dad stuff. He got the his wife stuff. At one point we hear he goes to the Mormon elders and they basically sanction him, and he's just like, whatever. And he keeps like on going. Like, he's really good at this.
Yeah.
In the article I read, or that other podcast, I wish I could remember what it was.
In the thing I'm referencing, which I don't know what it is.
Yeah. So, spend some time on Google. I did spend some time on Google and couldn't find it again. But Berchtold's wife plays a little bit more of a part in that telling of it. And she's like pretty aggressively in his corner with the family at times. It's like sort of delivering messages from him to them, I think, especially when he's in Mexico, but not in in kind of a threatening way, for what that's worth.
All right. Well, Kevin, I know that Toby thinks this is just a detail, but I really want to ask you about the alien plot.
Okay.
In Mexico, in that motorhome, Jan describes remembering lying next to a box.
I woke up. It was dark. I had the sensation that I was moving, but I was laying on a bed. My wrists and my ankles both had straps around them. I couldn't move. This monotone voice kept talking in my ear. It looked like a little white intercom-looking box that I could see to the side of my pillow.
That's right. An alien voice giving her a mission to make a baby with B. She's warned that harm will come to her family if she doesn't follow the mission. She really does believe the alien thing, like, hardcore.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I know the alien stuff was like a popular pop culture conversation in the 70s. We all know that. We know that the story that Burke told tells Jan about what happened to him when she finds him all beaten up and bloodied in the trailer is the Barney and Betty Hill story. He's just copying their New Hampshire abduction story and like telling it to Jan. What did you think of this alien subplot?
Well, it's obviously, pretty weird, but it fits in with his MO of manipulation. You're right. I mean, this was kind of a hot topic at the time, and a 12-year-old girl would probably believe something like this. Again, she trusts this guy very much, and he's able to super manipulate adults. I don't know much. I can't speak to much of this myself from any sort of personal experience, but our listeners who are LDS in the Mormon Church have said that there's a trust element that is particular to their faith that probably makes this story more believable. There is a quasi sci-fi element to the afterlife, about getting your own planet, so it kind of might start fitting with stories that she's heard at church. Just a lot of people sort of see religion in general. I mean, look at the Catholic Church, that you have a lot of faith in what you're told in the context of this is what God or a higher power wants you to do, and it's a great cover for those who want to be bad actors. Now, I don't want to have us be the ones talking on behalf of members of the LDS Church. This is what I'm hearing.
Yes,
I'm just
but
relaying
is it okay if I just go ahead and say what some of our listeners said?
Yeah,
I think
sure.
it's interesting. So we did get a question from Purdiel. She says, we had a thread on this in our Facebook group, and she responded to that thread, says, I'm surprised at how little focus there is in these comments on the religion here. There's almost no mention of it in the documentary except for what Jan says herself about the reasoning for believing the alien story. So Jamie, one of our listeners, who is an active member of the LDS Church, she says she would ask us not to bash. She doesn't think we would. The LDS Church, I will say, being LDS, we are more trusting, especially of other members. She says, I grew up in LDS in Oregon in the 70s. My parents never would have been that trusting, but my mom was also convinced I would accidentally cut off my toes if I mowed the lawn. Then we heard from Jessica, who is very thoughtful as well. She is a former member of the LDS Church, but she was very faithful for 28 years. Her comments also reflect those of my LDS whisperer friend, Tyler, who I sometimes reach out to when I have questions about Mormon stuff that we're going to talk about in the show. I want to just make sure I'm framing things the way that somebody with that perspective might. But Jessica says the religion played a very large role in every part of this story, especially since they were living in an area that was prominently LDS. There is inherent trust among Mormons and a bigger likelihood to forgive in situations that may not be appropriate. The local leadership was clearly aware, she says. Then she says Mormons tend to be overly sheltered and naive about sex itself. When you're taught that sex is dirty and bad your entire life until one day you're married and immediately expected to jump from maybe kissing to full-on sex with no education, there's a tendency to repress something that should be natural and healthy. And then she also says parts of the religion that impacted Jan were touched on directly by her. She talks about the alien stuff. There are many things I still love about the church, but this story highlights why some attitudes and behaviors in their leadership can be dangerous and harmful. And then finally, she says, and this is important, I do not believe that Berchtold's pedophilia or abusive, manipulative behaviors are due to his being LDS. I just think he had more opportunity and victims because of the culture of the church.
Isn't that what I just said?
Yes.
Did you just mansplain my answer? Thanks, Jessica.
We just LDS-splained your answer.
LDS
somebody who was actually qualified to give that answer.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I do not think that is the point at all, though. I think that it's much more a product of the 70s and sort of our culture about knowing who child molesters are and what stranger danger is about. It's the guy in the van with the candy. It's definitely not the really friendly neighbor next door who offers to come in, who sends you flowers and decides, hey, I'll help you build a wall to separate these bedrooms. The red flags are there in 2019.
Can it be both?
They're totally not there in 1972.
It can be both, though, Kevin. Because in closed communities, there's more opportunity for predation.
Well, I guess two things. One is, like, I don't think any of that stuff that they were just talking about is just specific to LDS. I mean, that's almost any religious Catholicism. I mean, come on. There's a tendency to trust and then protect in these religious communities. I mean, I don't think that's LDS specific. And then the second thing is, they keep saying, well, it's the 70s, it's different. Like, this guy literally kidnapped their daughter, took her to Mexico and married her, and then comes back and they still let him sleep in her bed for his therapy. It's like, yeah, that's not being naive. That's not the 70s. It's like,
bonkers.
It could be the 1870s.
Before? I mean, I know that it happened telling of the story, but the idea that you're going to sleep in the bed, didn't that start before the first abduction?
He was able to see her a lot and slept over after the kidnapping.
Well, I mean, they told that part of the story. They bounced around a little bit. What I liked about the way they told the story is that, for the first 10 minutes, they get through almost the first kidnapping, and I'm thinking, oh, this is done. But then they step back and sort of do the whole setup about sort of why he was able to get this far and manipulate the family. I think that's sort of one of the great ways that they tell the story. It is kind of stripped down in the way that they present the stuff. So we don't have any video of Jan today cooking eggs, and
B-roll, that kind
dad
of stuff,
fixing flour. Yeah, all that kind of stuff. It's just very straight on. This is kind of like what we remember seeing, in that basement. I know you wouldn't like the paneling, the wood paneling,
right,
or that shag carpet,
right,
but you have to love that mid-century modern furniture.
I do very much.
The kind you could get from Joybird.
Oh, Joybird. All right, so Laura Bricker, did you watch this documentary alone or did you watch it with somebody else?
I watched it alone.
How did you get through this?
I don't even know. It was funny because I think I was watching it and I started sending you guys messages on our little messaging app that we use. And I was just like, this is fucking bonkers.
Yeah.
Bananas, as you would say. I was just like, what is going on here? And then I think Kevin said, I would hate to be Laura watching this.
That's right.
I know, yeah.
That's right. So we watched it together. And I did tape some of Kevin's reactions to it in real time.
The judge sentenced him to 5 years and reduced all 5 years down to 45 days.
What the fuck?
He's to report
45 days?
3 months.
Tom Brady served more time for Deflategate than that guy served for kidnapping a girl and taking her to Mexico. The fuck, people!
Because this is definitely a singular kind of documentary where so much crazy shit happens that not having someone to react to it with, I can imagine it would be a very different experience. So, Laura, I have a question here that was posed by our listener, Candace. She says, let me get this straight. Your kid goes missing on Thursday night. You don't call the police because you don't want to upset your friend whose husband is also missing. You don't call anyone at all until Saturday, at which time you call the FBI, who are off for the weekend. You still don't call the local police. You don't want to get the poor authorities all, quote, worked up over nothing, so you wait another day. Finally, on Sunday, you call the FBI office in Butte, Montana, instead of the local police, and you still don't think anything is wrong. He just took her somewhere. He didn't kidnap her. What the fuck, Candace says. Laura, thoughts?
I just had a hard time sort of fathoming how somebody could be not only naive, but just so I don't know, trusting, clueless. I don't even know what it was was going on with these people. I was like, yeah, denial. I mean, it was just ridiculous. Listening to this, I'm like, are you even kidding me? I will tell you that, if my kid, anything happens, I am on that so fast. And granted, we're in a different generation, but can you even imagine if your kid went somewhere and you're like, well, I really don't want to bother them. No, Yeah. I'll wait till Monday. I'll wait till business hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. No, but it just kept going like that, and then then she comes back. They go get her in the prison. They bring her home. Oh, they don't ask her any questions. Hey, how's it going? And that's the end of that. And oh, by the way, they're married. Oh, that's fine. As this continued to snowball, I kept sitting there going, I can't believe this. How like what? And that was pretty much how, like, I couldn't even speak. It was just because I was speaking to myself as this was going on.
How can we call it? I mean, I think the naivete thing is one thing, but then mom has an 8-month-long affair with the man who kidnapped and married her daughter, her 13-year-old daughter, in Mexico.
I loved my husband, but I betrayed him. My sexual affair with Mr. Berchtold lasted for 8 months. I would say that I was in love with Berchtold. It was a exciting time for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. I know that there are some pedophiles who part of the thrill is to see how much of this they can do in front of the parents.
Yeah.
Just a reinforcement of their power. I was beyond amazed. I mean, I think with, this is a big assumption, and this is not really touched on in the documentary, so this is just me. I mean, I think it says a little bit about the mom and dad's relationship. Certainly someone who has an affair is not necessarily has a character flaw or something like that. It happens quite a bit. But it seems to me like B was probably the only one who was giving her that attention. And so even though she just, I stayed a little too long, I mean, I think that there certainly is some shame. I mean, you look at the father talking about his experience and the embarrassment.
Oh, my God.
By the way, in 1970, this guy looked old. He looked old in 1970.
Or the dad. The dad. Yeah, he did.
The dad looked old then.
He did.
And, again, I think that, again, what contributes a lot to this is the fact that this was not the kind of thing that was discussed in popular culture or in mass media. And so a lot of people didn't have a lot of experienced, these things that, the manipulation that can happen. It's because of stories like this that today we recognize the signs.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is still kind of shocking. I'm reminded of one of the first episodes of Mad Men that I saw taking place in the 50s, and it's like any women at the office were just secretaries, any black people there were operating the elevators,
right? And
everybody was smoking. It's like, I can't believe that's the way it was.
Right.
This is just a family sort of very naive, too trusting, and somebody who was able to identify certain things. And I guess it was all part of his plan to have some leverage over the parents in case something happened.
Toby, the one thing that really struck me was the casualness with which Dad talks about the handjob story.
Yes.
The casualness with which the mom talks about her 8-month-long affair with the man who kidnapped and molested and married their 12 and 13-year-old daughter. And just kind of I don't want to say it's nonchalance. Obviously, this family has told the story before. But does it surprise you about their willingness to have so much candor just sitting in front of a camera? It's not like we're seeing them talk to other people. It's literally just them talking to the director of this film. What do you think?
Well, I think they made a decision a while ago when they wrote that book, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, we're going to air our dirty laundry. Yeah, I think they've already kind of crossed that bridge. What I found kind of weird, I mean, I can see part of it is like in the grand scheme of everything that happened, the fact that I gave this guy a hand job in the car seems like kind of a minor moment compared to everything else. Although he gets pretty emotional about sort of the consequences of it. But I think the wife in particular, I think she recognizes it on a level, but there's some point at which it's like, look, this is what enabled everything else to happen.
Right.
Right. And so, yeah, you shouldn't have had an affair with this guy. And I think she's still you still get the sense that she looks at but it was such a wonderful time for me.
She's wistful. Yeah, there's a wistfulness about it.
And I think that, that may be indicative of the deeper lying issues that obviously are there.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. When they were both the parents, when they were talking about their sexual experiences with B, both of them, even though, years have passed, they, at this point, I would hope, recognize that this was terribly wrong. The way that they speak about it sort of gives you this window into just how manipulative B was, because they talk about it in such a way that they still talk about it with sort of, I don't want to say a fondness, but not in this is so disgusting, I can't believe I did it. More like just the way that they recount these sexual affairs that they had with him, it still didn't seem to really convey the seriousness of the situation because they talked about it in sort of this like nostalgic way almost.
He was very good. I mean, this is one of those moments where I was like, he must have been really fucking good at this.
Yeah, that many years later for them to recount it in that manner, I was like, whoa, they were really sucked in.
Well, I mean, they have had 45 years to process, what's going on. So,
and he was probably really good. Let's be real.
He was probably really good, but I think it seems like, well, I just sort of judging by the father's reaction, I think that he was a little more emotive than mom, but I think there are parts of it that, they're still embarrassed by, and then parts of it where they're telling their story because, they need to be brave and move on. Otherwise, you can't live your life in an emotional jail cell.
Speaking of nonchalance, let's talk about Bee's brother Joe, who makes several appearances in the film.
My brother was always a sexual pervert. He always did like his little girls.
Very casually telling us, that his brother was definitely a pervert and a pedophile, and yet he still hired him to work at his car dealership. Because, that's what you do.
He was good at talking people into stuff.
I hated that guy.
Nobody was better at selling cars than the pervert and pedophile who got a whole family into bed with him, right?
I hated that guy so much. I just was like, when he was talking about when Jan ran off, when didn't B had like the amusement park or whatever it was that he bought, and she went off to
family
go
fun
there.
Park?
Yeah, and then the brother went. He's like, and I had never seen them. I had never seen my brother happier. They were just so happy together. And she was a kid, but whatever. And I'm like, what? Like, are you even kidding me right now that you're recounting this story? Like, they were like having this big love affair, and you were like, well, they're happy, whatever. Each to their own. I'm like, oh my! I hated this man every time he came on.
Well, there is this whole weird, like, just going through some more plot points, just so that we can get through this, because there's so much. I mean, if we talk about every single plot point, we'll be here all day. But there is this sort of middle section where Jan it basically enters puberty and, like, becomes a petulant, pain-in-the-ass teenager. And because she thinks she loves B, convinces her parents to put her on a plane to go to him at his family fun park in Wyoming, or where the hell it was. Okay, that was super weird. But then, in 1976, there is a second kidnapping. B starts coming into their house again, basically steals Jan away from her family, claims he doesn't know where she is for months. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, he has squirreled her away at a private Catholic school in California by telling the nuns he's in the CIA. Thoughts, anyone?
That's the tell a big lie thing.
What do you mean?
Well, the idea that if you're going to lie, just lie huge, because people... Like if I say, well, I'm a traveling, piano salesman, people be like, really? But if you're like, I'm an international assassin, then people are like, who the fuck would lie about that? It's just like so outrageous. So it's the big lie.
And if you look at the pattern here, nuns in this private Catholic school, closed community. He knows he can go there and make the nuns also buy into this, because who are they going to tell? It's a closed community.
Right.
They're not going to leave the private Catholic school on the grounds and be like, hey, this girl's father is in the CIA. They don't talk to anyone else besides each other, these nuns, right? This guy knows what he's doing.
No. Sure. Well, he did, because he set it up so perfectly so that if anybody did find her, the nuns were going to think it was somebody that was like, the bad people that he and the CIA were hiding from. So he just set it up so perfectly.
He did. Absurdly, but perfectly. So, Kevin, the FBI agent that we see throughout the film, at one point while we were watching it, you were just saying, I'm just waiting for him to say that he also fucked this dude.
Yeah.
He also he seemed to get it, but not get it. Like, he was so annoyed with the parents and their sort of lack of ability to turn on B. Mm-hmm. And yet he also had sort of a nonchalance in telling the story, right?
Yeah, I don't know why everyone's hung up on the nonchalance of it.
I'm not hung up on it.
This
it's
didn't happen last year.
It's just an observation.
Yeah, okay. No, I mean, I think that his frustration with them kind of seeped out around the corners of his interview. But yeah, I mean, wouldn't you? You're all going all over the country trying to find their daughter, and then you just see the way that they. I don't want to say they brought it upon themselves, but they did not do the things that they were advised to do, and this is the reason why.
Right. Okay, so another plot point. They finally do get Jan back. Eventually, the family does come to see that B is a bad guy. 20 years later, Jan comes out and tells her parents the whole story, basically says, it wasn't just me being in love, surprise, surprise. Mm-hmm. He actually molested me, and so forth. she and her mom decide to write a memoir together. They go on a little speaking tour, doing these little engagements, and guess who shows up at all of their book engagements? Oh, and I completely forgot, by the way, that Bea burned down Dad's flower shop. Okay, that was another side story.
I forgot about that.
Yes, so Bea kind of can't let go of the fact that the story's being told. He accuses them of slander and so forth, and they have to take him to court for a restraining order. And then we actually do see real footage of that courtroom scene.
Mr. Berchtold has remained a threat and a danger to me and my family. It is a constant and continuous concern that has escalated in recent months.
I hadn't seen the man for 30 years, and for about the first 5 minutes, I was shaking like a leaf.
You know this is quite a story, and you have sold a lot of books because of the story, right?
We've sold a few books, not enough to make back the investment that we made to publish the story.
Okay, you told ABC News that you were going to make a movie, is that correct?
I didn't tell ABC News that. I told them that there might be offers for that. It could happen, I don't know.
Is this your goal?
This is my goal? My goal, Mr. Berchtold, is to educate the public about predators like you. That is my goal.
This was probably one of my biggest rage moments. Just when I thought the rage couldn't get worse watching this documentary, I was like, first of all, what kind of court is this that it's okay for her to sit on one side and him to sit on the other, and him to start questioning her and going off on her, and nobody intervenes in all of this? Like, are you even kidding me?
The judge was looking at another direction. He wasn't even looking at
filling out some paperwork.
Oh, yeah, no. I was just like what kind of courtroom was this? But then when she stood up to him, I was like, yes, you go, girl. Like, that was awesome to see, but I just couldn't believe that this jackass just got to sit there and be like, well, you've made a lot of money off your book, haven't you? Well, you want to do this, don't you? Well, and what's your purpose in being here? I'm like, my purpose is to smack you on the head right now. I hate you so much. But then we had the biker gang that was protecting her.
Bikers against child abuse.
Like the details in this story just kept getting, I can't even top that. And then he ran over one of them?
Yes. I will say, I do have some tape of Kevin reacting to our introduction to the Bikers Against Child Abuse. Let me just play that real quick.
One of the bikers recognized him and says, "That's Berchtold, let's get him." And jumped on the hood of he had a Dodge van. And they jumped up on the front and was holding on to the windshield wiper. So he sped up and then stopped fast. And the guy fell off, but he got hurt.
Okay, this is the point of documentary where, I hate to say it, but it's true, we were just laughing at every damn thing that happened because it was just insanity upon insanity upon insanity. Toby, doesn't every neighborhood have a friendly BACA, Bikers Against Child Abuse chapter, just zipping around, protecting children?
Of course.
There's so many of those, guys that are on bikes that get together for some cause. Yeah, I mean, there's like Rolling Thunder, which was like a very legitimate, famous one for like Vietnam vets.
Bikers for Christ, I think. There's another one.
Right. And then it starts, I keep saying, okay, we're now like trickling down to, Bikers
Against Child Abuse. Who are the bikers for child abuse? That's what I want to know.
Right. But like, what do you do on a motorcycle to prevent child abuse? Apparently, you take the guy out.
Well, he takes you out on his bike.
Yeah.
So Berchtold is then charged, found guilty of possession of a firearm and aggravated assault for the biker incident. By the way, he spent less than a year in prison altogether for the multiple kidnappings and child molestations.
He spent 10 days?
10 days, yeah. 45 days got bumped down to 10.
That's right.
Yeah. Should have been 45 fucking years.
Exactly.
There's an alien planet to save, Kevin.
Oh, that's right, yes.
But then we find out from
Complete the mission.
His wonderful brother Joe that he died by suicide before the sentencing could take place by drinking pills along with Kahlua and milk.
You know what you call that?
I don't mean to laugh, but...
Okay, so, Kevin, what did you call this, Dad?
I first called it suicide by sombrero.
And my son called it a...
White Russian roulette.
That's good.
Now, of course, we're not laughing at the act of dying by suicide. Everybody knows that is a horrible tragedy to befall anybody in any
As Laura
family.
Bricker says, who the fuck kills themselves by drinking
Kahlua and milk?
But it is just it's one more detail that just caps this story, that just barrages you. It's not a very long, what is it, an hour and a half?
Hour and 30 minutes.
It just pelts you with detail after detail after, and by the time you get to that point, you don't feel tragedy, you just feel hysterical because you've just been like pelted for like an hour and a half with weird facts.
Yeah. At this point, you just feel so divorced from reality.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's just thing after thing after thing. And it's just hard to, I think one of the effects of this whole documentary is that by the end, everything is so batshit crazy that it's just hard to see any of these people as other than characters in some ways. I was like, whenever we get back and like at the very end, sort of grown up Jan gets emotional. It's like, okay, have to kind of reground in the fact that this is actual people this is happening to, because otherwise it just reads as sort of like this absurdist sort of fake thriller. I mean, it is. I mean, it's like something you would read on the paperback rack at the drugstore. It's
you wouldn't
totally
believe it.
out there.
You wouldn't believe
if it was, yeah.
I think that we should just do what we do. I mean, I know we've missed about 1 million tiny details that were in this film, like the sudden disappearance of B's wife, and like we never hear from her again. Like what happened there, for instance. But let's do what we do. Let us give
about his kids.
I know, and his kids. Yes. Let's do what we do. Let's give our thumbs up or thumbs down review. Would you recommend that people check out Abducted in Plain Sight if they haven't yet? Laura Bricker, what do you think?
I would say if you want to jumpstart your rage walking routine in the new year, definitely watch this because you're going to be rage walking for about the next 2 weeks straight. So thumbs up.
Toby Ball, what about you?
So I guess my serious question about this is watching like an hour and a half of like every 3 minutes, like a what the fuck moment. Does that make a good documentary? And if you think it does, then definitely this is for you. I'm a little bit on the fence. I guess I would give it a thumbs up just because if that's your thing, you'll really like it because it's just like kind of nonstop. But other than the actual story, like there's not a whole lot added to this. I mean, it's just basically like, here's the story and here are the people who are involved and they'll tell it to you. The end. So yeah, kind of a moderate thumbs up.
I'm really torn because my thinking about this is that if you just want something to watch on your own to get a really good documentary, like this is not that. I would say thumbs down for that. This, I almost believe like it's a genre that we haven't seen anything else that fits this category. Like you kind of have to watch it with somebody else. It's kind of like the red wedding scene in Game of Thrones. Like I really think there could be a new meme for people like I did with you, Kevin, just videotape other people watching this and get their reactions and share them online because it's so shocking. And I think more shocking because of the matter-of-fact way in which it's told. And that's, by the way, Kevin, like I'm not hung up on the fact that they are matter-of-fact. I'm hung up on the fact that that's how we are getting this information. Mm-hmm. It makes it more shocking to see somebody just tell you, who isn't like telling you in a state of hysteria. They're just telling you that they were kidnapped twice and they believe that their aliens were behind it or whatever. So I'm really torn. I guess ultimately I did want to finish watching it, and I'm still talking about it with people, so I will give it a thumbs up, but it's more to me of a spectator sport than a thoughtful documentary. So I'm going to give it a thumbs up. If that is what you're looking for, a true crime spectator sport, thumbs up. What about you, Kevin?
I am a thumbs up. What Toby thought was its weakness, I actually think is its strength. The story itself is so powerful and outrageous that it carries the whole documentary, and that just trying to add to it, embellish certain things, I just feel like it just would not be useful. I think one of the problems with a lot of the documentaries and podcasts that are substandard have to do with source material, right? It's kind of an interesting story, but it's not anything spectacular. And they try to, find the ways that maybe it is. This is just a outrageous, unbelievable story at its heart, and to just tell it, I think, is the way to go. Now, you guys may remember that over the summer, I went to Toronto for the Toronto True Crime Film Festival, and this was the opening night film. And I missed it because I was coming from Washington. I wasn't there till the next day. Laura, I can only imagine what the crowd reaction was for an hour and a half watching this film. You think sitting on the couch or something. You imagine being in a packed theater. And there was just a huge buzz about it for the rest of the time. I met the director, Sky Borgman, sort of by accident at the end, and I heard all these really great things. I said, what's next for your film? He said, Netflix just picked it up, and it'll be out in January. And I was like, great, put this down. I'm like thinking again, I hope this is good. And it did not disappoint me.
Rebecca, are you ready for a demonstration of the marketing power of dynamically inserted advertising?
Always.
No en español?
We?
Well, fall is right around the corner, and HelloFresh is here to help you plan for a busy season ahead with tasty dishes delivered right to your door. Simply choose your recipes and pick your delivery date, then lay back and enjoy the last days of summer knowing dinner is covered.
Hola, Fresco.
So if you have been following us online and stuff, you know Rebecca and I have been traveling for business, for pleasure. And so what that means is that we leave our youngest at home with the dogs.
I mean, he's 20. He's
I know.
Not
I was
that
just
young.
going to say.
It's not like he's 4.
It's not like labor laws in
CPS.
Arkansas. I get it. But we'd be gone for a couple of days, and then for dinner, it would either be he goes, takes our credit card, and maxes it out on delivery, or we give him our 2-person HelloFresh.
Yes.
Because not only is it's easy to make, right? It's something that he can achieve. Everything is right there in one big bag. Everything's pre-portioned, and it's delicious.
He gets to chop and dice. He loves it. He sends us photos of all the little ingredients on the cutting board. He really feels a lot of pride because he actually is a pretty good cook. But HelloFresh bumps up his game.
Yeah, he feels like he's going to be like a TikTok influencer.
Yes.
But probably not.
Nope. Just go to HelloFresh.com/50crime.
50crime.
And use code 50crime.
50crime.
For 50% off plus free shipping. That's HelloFresh.com/50crime.
50crime.
That's 50crime for 50% off plus free shipping at HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Wow, that was really quite the discussion.
Brought us back.
Did memories.
Remember people were doing memes of themselves?
Oh my God.
Reacting or showing somebody else reacting for the first time?
It was like the red wedding of true crime.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we've had anything quite like that since.
Yeah, it's really WTF infused, as you said. Anyway, this show was recorded in the Treehouse Yoga Studio above the Mockingbird Cafe in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, the closet in our New Hampshire basement, where we also get messages from outer space telling us to, quote, complete the mission. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.